thanks so much for coming on the Sales and Sports podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you on. Typically, we kick off by giving the floor to the guest. So we'd love to hear a bit about yourself. Who are you? What are you doing now in the tech industry? And we'll take it from there.
Yes, thanks for having me, Jack. Yeah, absolute pleasure. My name is Matt Betty. I'm the Vice President of Sales across Europe for a company called Eloomi. So we work in the learning development space, and we provide software to organizations that allow them to manage their training and their personal development through the software, sort of a learning management system effectively, and then there's sort of everything else around that.
Amazing. And as it's the Sales and Sports podcast, is epic to have an ex-athlete on. So we'd love to, for the listeners, we'd love to hear how you got into the tech space, your transition from professional rugby, and I guess maybe starting even before that and going from traditional education. Have you studied anything, and if you had any passions from studies, or was it always sports? So really just talking about your journey from school to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Blackpool. You can tell by the northern accent I've not lost it. I've tried to a little bit sometimes, but managed to keep hold of it. So I grew up in Blackpool, and I went to a rough school, but it's a pretty state school. They didn't play rugby. It was very football orientated. So I grew up with football, cricket, and joined the local rugby club. And then I fell in love with the rugby. So I managed to get a scholarship to a private school that wasn't too far down the road. And that's when I sort of realised that education is also part of sport in the sense of that, especially with rugby, you can do both together, right? So I from there did my 2 years there in lower sixth and upper sixth, and did my A levels, and then I got into the Ireland under 18 squad at the time, and I got offered a scholarship at Hartpury College, which is a well-known rugby university. So I went down there in Gloucester, and signed for Gloucester Academy as well. So they supported me through my journey in getting a degree as well. So I started studying sports coaching science, pretty much like every budding rugby player does. I think they can just do a bit of coaching science, but actually kind of fell in love with the coaching element of it. But the application wasn't right for me, so I went into then transferred to sports business management, which I guess is quite relevant to obviously what I'm involved in doing now, which is running a business. So at the time I didn't think it would ever be relevant. I just thought there was some crossover there, but actually looking back, there was so much that I learned without realizing it that I use day to day now, right? So I think that's my journey into sort of through education and rugby hand in hand. Never actually got to put the degree to use for a few years, because I was lucky enough to be playing rugby and doing a bit of traveling around playing some rugby until I got to about 25, and I was playing, and I was at London Irish at the time, and I was on loan. I wasn't getting much game time, and I was still trying to scratch around, trying to make some money. And I was on loan at a club, and the club said to me, well, why don't you just play for us and we'll get you a job as well. So the job was in recruitment, as most people fall into, right? It was in recruitment, but it was tech recruitment, and that's when I sort of developed a passion for sales. I say a passion, but I guess I liked it because I showed a bit of promise in it, and I could see myself improving. It was something new to me, so I think it was quite fun to have a new career without realizing it at the time, I guess.
Nice. That's really cool, and it's quite rare that we have professional rugby players or ex-professional rugby players on the pod. What was it like being a rugby player, and are there any skills or traits that you've taken from that career path into your tech sales journey today?
Yeah, 100%. Loads is the answer. What it was like being a rugby player it was great. I guess if you ask every rugby player, they'll have different elements of it, because some of the guys that I was lucky enough to play with that went on to play for England, British Lions, and were incredibly successful. Their journey was a little bit different to mine, right? And I was sort of scratching around trying to get game time in regular first team spots, and big contracts, and fighting the sort of fighting with your mates to try and get that last big contract, or that spot for next season. So it was tough from a lot of it, but don't get me wrong, there's lots of fun that's involved with it. Great training. You don't realize that you make friends for life through rugby, and I certainly have done. And it's an incredible journey. But yeah, I think depending on where you're at within that journey, and actually relating that to business now, seeing some of those guys who have gone on to be very successful in their careers and play to their 35, right, and looking to play to 35, and now coming out of rugby and having to start their journey in the business world. And now I'm quite grateful that I managed to have the ability to get in 10 years ago and have a great career, and the ability to kick on in my career and have that 10 years behind me where some guys are starting fresh. So swings and roundabouts. If you talk about traits, Jack, I guess the most obvious one is competitiveness, right? Like that's what people look for. I make a lot of hires, and if anyone is from a sporting background, they're going to be competitive, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be the best and they want to be better than everyone else, but they want to better themselves and beat their own performances and improve on themselves. And I think that's a level of competitiveness that you can always bring into sales in any capacity. So I think that's the obvious trait. And then things like discipline, right? Things like sport, professional sport, and particularly rugby, they teach you just the basics that you don't realize. But if you're late, you can be dropped, you get fined, if so, timekeeping and being punctual and on time, and arriving in the right uniforms and all the basics, or what we think are basics might not be basics to somebody who's never done that before, right, and never had exposure to a requirement like that. So I think that's also something that you naturally take over and just become coachable, because if you're good at sport, you have to be coachable. And if you're going to be good at sales, you have to be coachable. You can have all the natural talent, but to maximize that, you need to be coachable.
Definitely, no, completely agree. And also, I guess the ability to handle, pressure and still operate at a high level. Because I know, for the listeners, you played a bit of international rugby. Was it for Wales there? Was it what level was that? Was that when you were?
Yeah, that's offensive. No, it's Ireland. It was, yeah. So I played for Ireland under 18s and then 19s and 20s. So I was lucky enough to represent Ireland at up to under 20s, which was good fun, and some good traveling, and very competitive. A good insight into you get to spend some time with the first team sometimes, and you get to see the guys at the very top, which was great. And I was lucky enough to be around Gloucester at that time as well, so obviously Premiership team as well. So yeah, there's lots of insights into the guys at the top. When I started when I was 18, the big names there, club captains were Mike Tyndall, right? Obviously a very famous name in the sport, and people like that you look up to, and you try and see what they're doing and learn from them. So it was lots to take in, right? And lots of crossovers from the pressure environment that you referred to, because it's such a results driven industry, sport, and so is sales. It's numbers, and you can, if you're not applying the feedback and not remaining coachable, and you're not hitting your numbers in sales, right, it's very difficult to then be successful. And you can apply the same to rugby. If you're not getting the results you need as a team or as an individual in that team, you're not working on the things you've been asked to work on and applying those in training and in games, again, you're going to struggle. So there's, again, great reference points for both.
Love that. No, thanks so much for sharing. And I guess why tech? I know when we first met, you mentioned you're passionate about getting more ex-athletes, especially ex-rugby players, into the tech industry. Why is that? And do you mind, just for those that are tech curious or sales curious, giving a bit of a background to why it's such a rewarding industry to be in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I guess why for me was a bit of luck initially, because I went to tech recruitment, and I don't consider myself technical. I think that's one thing to point out. You don't have to be technical to work in tech, right? You just have to be knowledgeable around a product or the service that you're selling, right? So I would consider myself technical, but I was selling my services to organizations to place DevOps engineers, web developers, app developers, right? So you have to have technical conversations, but I think that's something that you naturally pick up. For me as well, within sport, it's really interesting to see, if you ask people what industry they would want to go into, they either have no idea, or they end up especially in rugby, either in London in insurance or end up in tech, right? And I think tech. Sorry, there's some building work going on outside typically, but with tech, it's a growing industry. It's a strong industry because it's only ever going to be more prevalent in our lives than less. So the security there, right? And I think that's something that people will look for. And it's such a huge space. There's room for everybody. I think so few industries now are not overly saturated where you feel daunting going in there. Hey, I'm not an industry expert, so I'm never going to be successful. You can go into tech with no knowledge and come out with, a good story, some money in your back pocket, a career, a business, whatever it is, right? And so fast.
100%. And there's fast progression, right? There's, as you mentioned, there's unlimited, space to grow, but typically you come in as maybe an entry-level salesperson with no prior experience and earn 30 to 40,000 as a base salary with maybe 15,000 on top of commission, and you can progress quickly into an end-to-end sales role, account executive, even higher up, and be earning, within 3 years, close to six figures, if not that. So there's definitely a lot of earning potential within the tech space, but also sales, because you have the commission element as well. So
100%. Yeah, I mean, that's where the sports people are driven, because you're aiming for commission, you're aiming for more all the time, you're always driving. And I think that's where they're successful in sales, is because they're not happy with the basic salary within sales and tech sales. Typically, like you say, alluded to, commission structures are pretty favorable because of the money that's in tech. And if you're incentivized by that, if you've got that personality where you're driven to be at the top of leaderboards and the top of and people giving your ego a bit of a boost, which some sports people like, right? Then it's a good marriage.
Epic. And as this is Sales and Sports podcast, just want to pivot back to sports. What do you make of the new tackling laws in rugby, and also what do you think about the World Cup going forward? Who's going to win it?
Yeah, two good questions. How long have we got? But the first point on tackling laws, I mean, I'm probably the least knowledgeable around this to ask, because was typically always the smallest and the lightest in the team, so I was not renowned for my tackling. But certainly happy to hear that someone wouldn't be ripping my head off. But it's very tough at the moment. I look at it from 2 points of view, because I know lots of people through rugby who have had to retire through head injuries or sustained serious injuries myself. I've got a load of injuries now that I wish I would have sorted out when I was younger, and so I completely understand that they need to address player welfare, and that should be the priority. I just don't know how they're going to do it. And obviously they've gone down the tackling laws. Practically, I don't think they can apply it, like a pick and go around rugby. I know, without getting too technical, how you're going to be able to tackle someone below the chest if they're only 6 inches off the ground in the first place. There's lots of ambiguity around it. So that's one thing I'd fear for the sport a little bit, and the development of the sport. I think, it is something revolutionary is going to happen soon. More rule changes, whatever that may be. And obviously in rugby now, and that's why people are falling out of rugby earlier than they perhaps were pre-pandemic, and they're falling into sales roles or tech roles maybe earlier in their career than they would like, unfortunately. Those people, I would say, take the positives, because you can build a career a lot earlier. That'll set you up for 30 years. As much your passion that you want to do rugby, but there's always a silver lining. Who's going to win the World Cup? I'm going to go with Ireland. I think New Zealand will, but I think I'm obviously going to cheer for Ireland. I'm going to push. Obviously you can tell by my Irish accent, right? But I'm going to support Ireland, and I'm going to give them a bit of a chance, maybe a final or semi-final.
Nice. Yeah, I think.
What about you got any money on anyone?
I'd say France, being the hosts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be a European team, given the home advantage. So we'll see. Obviously, you can't rule out South Africa. They want to keep the trophy, but
they're typically not too. A lot of their guys play in Europe, and they're not too bothered around the time changes. The time zone difference isn't much of an issue for them. So I would put them down as a strong contender. Always, you would play with South Africa, but
I think Australia will be a wild card as well with Eddie Jones. He'll rile them up. So you never know. He's got a good record.
Do well in Europe with those guys, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm actually looking forward to it now. It could be our last World Cup where we, before we see the game completely change. Again, I'm wrong, but that's just how I perceive it. And yeah, I'm thinking, this will be a one to savor, hopefully.
Yeah, it's great. Crazy as well to see the clubs. So I'm a London Wasps fan, and seeing the demise of them and Worcester and even London Irish in a bit of trouble. So it's a shame to see that. And one last thing for me is the 3 and 4G pitches, like the artificial turf. And players playing on that. Some of the injuries that come out of those pitches. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, originally I was a massive fan of them because like I alluded to, I was shorter and lighter. So, if it's a boggy pitch or a muddy pitch, it doesn't really benefit me. I used to use my footwork. So the idea of a 4G pitch was like my favorite thing, and that's what we trained on when I was 18. So I was so lucky. But actually, what I didn't realize was it was destroying my body and my hamstrings, my glutes, and my back because of it. And as I got older, I ended up getting my injuries on 4G pitches. Both my Achilles, I snapped one on Achilles tendon, and the other one went as well recently. So that was just from running around on a 4G. I mean, there's some amazing pitches. I love playing on them still. The Saracens ground is lovely, but they do bring their headaches. Different approach if you're going to play in one week in, week out, and the injuries that you get are different, and you have to manage, low manage a lot differently, and it's difficult, but you have to weigh up the pros and cons. Do you want to be playing on a 4G pitch, or is the game going to get cancelled in December because it's freezing and rock hard because it's frozen, or waterlogged? It's you've got to weigh up. But they are fun. But I think when you're young, they're great. When you get a bit older, you're thinking, just bring me a bit of soft grass, and look after my body. So it's funny to see the two angles.
Love it. Well, I've really enjoyed having you on and enjoyed the conversation. So thanks so much. One last thing for me: where can people find you if someone's looking to transition out of sport? What's the best way to get in touch with you? And
just add me on LinkedIn. So just again, it's Matthew Betty. But just add me on LinkedIn, drop me a message if they've listened and they just want to inquire about it. And I've always tried to be helpful to people coming out of sport, because I know how hard it can be to start a new career, maybe potentially in your mid-20s all the way through to your mid-30s, coming out of sport, and starting again is really daunting. But if you've got the traits that made you successful in sport, then you'll have some traits that will make you successful in tech and sales. So please reach out if you do, and if I can't help directly, I'll try and find the people that can.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Absolute legend. Keep in touch. We'll circle back offline.
No, it's been a pleasure, Jack. Thanks for having me, and I hope to keep in touch.
Take care. Thanks, man.
Cheers, man. Bye-bye.
Yeah.